Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. And I've got a brand new guest on. I'm happy to have Sean McClintock on. He works as a fatherhood support facilitator and development coordinator for Parent Aid in Tucson, Arizona. Parent Aid is a nonprofit whose mission is to build confident, connected families through parent education and a nurturing community. Sean also is the father of an 8-year-old girl and has been in a protracted custody dispute over his child for the last 8 years. Sean is also a pro se litigant, attorney in fact, and staunch advocate for fathers and parental rights. Sean began as a client with Parent Aid in 2019, taking parenting classes as a single dad, and was invited to become a facilitator in 2022 when he helped create and launch Parents Aid Love Like a Dad program. Now he hosts a weekly dad support group online, facilitates several workshops a week for parents, and works in his community to spread awareness about the corruption and injustice in the family court and help parents navigate the civil process while focusing on health and wellness. Sean also writes for the quarterly Raising Arizona Kids, and Sean is an active member of the philanthropic social groups, the Foothills Club, and 100 Guys Who Give. And I welcome you, Sean McClintock. You know,
Thank
we've
you
all
so
been,
much.
I'm glad to have you on. We've all been through the family court, and we were talking earlier. It just should be abolished. Where are you at with
Absolutely.
all that?
100%, 100%. I think it's outside of the jurisdiction of the Constitution and Article 1 and Article 3. And I found out just recently that the Arizona Family Court was only developed in 1984. So it's only 40 years old, they just wrote all this stuff up out of nowhere. Um, and it was really in Arizona, it was Judge Warren, who I recently met, that basically just designed and built the whole family court system here in Arizona. And of course, she thinks it's perfect and it can't do any wrong. But as we know, that's certainly not the case for children or parents.
No, I mean, how old is she?
Um, that's a good question. I would say she's got to be in her 80s at this point. Um, Yeah, I met her at a recent social event. I'm also work with Social Venture Partners, which is a an organization here that pulls together money and also pulls together different nonprofits. It's kind of a sort of a hub of nonprofits here. And She was at a recent event, and I got to meet her. And I tried to engage in a conversation with her and generate a conversation, but she wasn't having it. She just wouldn't go there with me, to discuss the family court.
Oh, probably because she figured out it failed and she doesn't want to talk about it now.
Right. Yeah. She's a hardliner when it comes to family court. I looked her up online and did a little research on her, and I saw some interviews with her, and she just thinks that family court can do no wrong, that it's perfect as it is, which is really sad. I think anyone that can't self-reflect, and have some constructive criticism, then that's a red flag in my opinion.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but yeah, I think Pima County is probably the worst, is my understanding. I sort of meet regularly with a lawyer in town. If I could sort of plug him, his name is Ron Reynes. He's a really great lawyer here in town that really tries to settle and close matters. He's a flat fee lawyer. He doesn't gouge his clients over years. He wants to, wrap it up and ultimately get, equal parenting time for both parents and just work
Mm.
out the details. But he also he works in Maricopa and in Cochise County, and I think maybe even Santa Cruz County here in southern Arizona. And he said that Pima County is the worst right now as far as the judges and parents getting equal shake. So it's really interesting, and I don't know why that is the case. I guess it's just the judges, but um, he's saying that the other courts, Maricopa and Cochise, he's having a lot more success in just settling matters and wrapping it up.
Mhm. That's got to be pretty difficult when you're dealing with personality disorders that don't want to quit.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's kind of how I got into the space initially, is that when I first filed my petition for paternity in 2017, my ex and I were never married, and so as in many states, you have to establish paternity before you can even get any rights to your child, right? So I had no choice but to file a petition for paternity just to get acknowledgement by the state that this child was mine, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, there is no assumption if you're not married. So, as that started going on, and the first year or so, it was just constant um, litigation by my ex. Just all these allegations left and right. Never agreeing to anything. Um, we were just constantly in court, and so then I started. I kind of came across, I guess, like Sam Vaknin and Richard Grannon and these guys on YouTube that talk about cluster B personality types, narcissism, bipolar, borderline, all that stuff. And it all started kind of clicking, and I started seeing the patterns of behavior, the pathological lying, the manipulation, the gaslighting, everything, the flying monkeys, all the keywords there. And so then that kind of led me into really this space in a way. I came across Brandon Joe Williams. I want to give him a big plug. He has really been a saint, I think, in this whole space, because I started looking into trust law and common law, natural law in my research, my legal research. And it was very intriguing, because under trust law, common law, your children are essentially your property.
Mhm.
And so in a civil matter, that's really the issue, right? You're really dealing with property rights.
Mhm.
Um, and so that really just blew my mind. When you start talking about the birth certificates and the ens legis, and
Mhm.
it's such a huge rabbit hole. And I think he's really on the cutting edge of all that conversation. There's other guys like Amir El and Yusuf El and some other people that are in that space, and it's all very intriguing.
Yeah, because parents really don't know that your children are your property. It's not the government's property. There's a big
Right, but
confusion there.
but right, but when you sign that birth certificate, what people don't realize is you're literally signing your rights away to your child.
Mhm.
Um, it's fascinating because one of the workshops that I do here is called Boot Camp for New Dads,
Mhm.
and so I get all these dads coming in. We do it about every 6 weeks here, and I talk to them about the birth certificate. I talk to them about hey, listen, you want to do some research on this and you want to look into this because you sign this piece of paper and you actually don't even know what you're doing, to your child, and so I kind of introduce this stuff, and some people I'm surprised there's a lot more people that are understanding their rights when it comes to the birth certificate and creating this legal entity so that the U.S. government corporation can control our lives.
Yeah, it's very daunting, and I just feel bad for these young parents that you see them at the store, and it's like, God, I hope they don't ever set foot into a family courtroom.
Yeah. I see these people at the Superior Court because, as you know, people get their marriage license there, and you see these young kids and they're waiting to get their marriage license. And I want to pull them aside and have a chat. The reality is that people need to understand when you get married, you're going into contract with the U.S. government corporation. So there's three parties in that marriage. It's not just you and your partner, it's you, your partner, and the U.S. government corporation. So and they're going to get their share, if you will.
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's really what it comes down to, I think, is money. And uh you know, when you think about the past, there was common law marriages, or people got married in the church, obviously. And it's the same with a day of nativity, is people would write their children's name, their family tree in the Bible. As we know, the Constitution is mostly based on the Christian Bible and Black's commentaries. Um, but um, but yeah, a lot of people don't realize that there's a whole business around birth certificates and
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
selling of and the registration of your children and that kind of thing. So I encourage everybody to really take a deep dive into that stuff. And this is where I think we can start really asserting our rights and taking our property back, if you will, and taking our rights back for our families is asserting that, we don't have to sign that birth certificate. We don't have to get a social security for our children, social security card number.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah. Um, uh,
But then what happens at the hospital, as I recall so long, long ago, I signed the birth certificate. I think I did. They
mhm.
just hand it to you. So what happens to a parent if they say, no, I'm not signing it? Are they going to call CPS on you?
Ann Mirror talks about that because he had that issue. Amir L, he talked, they had CPS come after them, or DCS is what they call it here in Arizona. And they basically wanted him to sign a birth certificate. And fortunately, he apparently had his children in a trust as beneficiary, and that's how he asserted his equitable substantive rights.
Mhm.
um and so yeah, my understanding is that they might come after you.
Mhm.
Uh so I haven't done too much research into that, but I think it's important to really find out for parents where they want to make that play.
Right, because I also think CPS should also be abolished along with family court. They serve no
100%.
earthly purpose, along with the third-party parasites called guardian ad litems or AFC for the child.
Hmm. Yeah, and here they also have I can't remember, they call them CASAs, court appointed
Mhm,
special advocates. And those are specifically for juveniles who are wards of the state, and they're either in a placement, because they've been taken away from their parents, or,
mhm,
maybe their parents are deceased or something like that.
mhm,
But they are wards of the state typically, or there's one parent that doesn't have rights and one does, and they're trying to figure out, um, you know, what to do in that situation. But yeah, these people are horribly undertrained, I think. And then unfortunately in Arizona, I don't know about other states, but all the guardian ad litems are lawyers, you know.
mhm.
Just
Yeah,
anytime there's a
typical,
lawyer involved, there's a conflict of interest, in my opinion.
and a lot of money.
Oh yeah, that too. That too. Yeah. And we had mentioned it before when we were talking prior, but I think the whole racket of the family law business needs to be just shuttered, and they should put a cap on the retainers. Just they should make it all flat fee. Um,
Mhm, mhm,
and I think there's a larger movement for that. I know there are some lawyers that are advocating for that now, but I think it should be mandated,
mhm,
frankly. This is how much it's going to cost you to do a divorce or do a custody suit, and we're going to get it done. And this is, it's not going to go on for years and years and years.
mhm. Yeah, I agree with that because, as we all know, they're dragging out these cases, filing continuances after continuances, stressing people out, or they're making parents and children sick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I recently notified the court. I sent in progress notes from my daughter at, her therapist. And, I'll just be super candid. I haven't seen my daughter since July. And I was doing supervised visitation for the last year. And, um, and then somehow this agency that we're using decided to suspend the visitation without notifying anybody. Meanwhile, there's been no issues whatsoever. Everything has gone great. But in classic sort of NPD way, my ex made a lot of false allegations against me to manipulate the court. Despite that she was arrested for a DV assault in 2017 and pled guilty.
Mm,
Of course, I'm the bad guy.
yeah.
And so unfortunately, because of the charges that were pending, our trial, my criminal defense lawyer, she advised me to not testify during the family court case because of course, anything that I said under oath could be used against me, right? And I
Mm,
think this is part of the whole plan. I realize this is the strategy of these family law lawyers is, make false allegations, right?
mhm,
Then we get you in court and we basically gag you, to where you can't talk about any of this stuff, right? Because then it's
mm-mm.
evidence. And then they just pack that hole of misinformation with lies. And my ex perjured herself left and right on the stand, and I even
Yeah.
presented evidence that showed that she was perjuring herself. Um, and I mean, hearsay statements left and right. And I had filed a notice. There's here in Arizona, there's Rule 2, which if you invoke Rule 2, it's it bars any witnesses from making hearsay statements. And I would object in proceedings, and and the judge would overrule my objection. And then I would also uh, ask questions that she wouldn't answer, right? And so I'd ask the judge, hey, she has to answer these questions. You have to compel her to answer the questions. And the judge literally would look at me and say, ask another question. And I'm just like, wow,
Oh, no. No, no.
this is your job. This is what you're supposed to do. And so there was clear bias and prejudice throughout the proceedings. And she dismissed witnesses that I had subpoenaed, a detective, DCS, here it's called Department of Child Safety, DCS specialist, family conciliation court evaluators. There were three major witnesses that I had that she didn't make testify. Um, so the prejudice and the bias was just rampant in my case.
And you had no due process either.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Well, as I mentioned, we were talking before, I appealed the ruling, um, which, prior to the trial, I had my daughter every weekend for the
Mhm.
last, 7 years. We had made in 2018, we made, it was, I think, Rule 69 is what's called a binding agreement, right? So basically, we had a contract, that was signed by the court
Mhm.
that said, we've got 50-50 parenting time, and it was a 3-4-4-3 schedule, right? And the way it worked out is I had my daughter every weekend. It
Mhm.
was I picked her up either on Thursday, dropped her off Monday, or picked her up on Friday, dropped her off Monday. So every weekend for the last 7 years, my daughter was with me.
Mhm.
Um, and the court ordered supervised visitation from that. So I literally got my daughter stripped from me, taken, stolen from me by the court. And then I appealed the case, of course, and I filed a stipulated motion with the other party to unseal the testimony and the evidence, right? Because you have to cite the testimony, you have to cite the evidence, right?
Mhm.
And the judge denied the stipulated motion, which again violates not only due process, right, but it violates the rule for unsealing and sealing of documents, because it says very matter of fact that if both parties agree to unsealing, that the judge has to rule it, and she denied the motion. So she clearly has an interest in the case that
Mhm.
is prejudicial in my opinion.
Do you want to name your judge?
Yeah, her name is Danielle Camps Constant. She's a Pima County Superior Court judge here in Arizona. She was an appointee of Doug Ducey. I say affectionately, Doug Ducey was our former conservative alt-right, Trump-loving president, or governor, sorry. And so, they, of course, they packed the court with their own, and so she just came onto the bench in 22. the fall of 22, and we had our trial in March of 23. So she had barely, been on the bench for 6 months. And, she was a prosecutor, of course.
Mhm.
And before that, she was a family law lawyer, right?
Mm.
And, she was like, I think she was given like Lawyer of the Year by Moms Against Drunk Driving type thing. So she was one of those staunch, right wing, put him in jail type of lawyers, prosecutors, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And that's the way she came at me, honestly, the moment that I walked in the courtroom, the moment she stepped into the court, I knew I was screwed. I knew I was done for. I mean, it was just all over her face, I
Mhm.
mean, she couldn't hide it. And then she proceeded to prove me right, in the sense that she would snap at me. She was very disrespectful. She would shut me down. She wouldn't let me talk. Um, and then the opposing counsel is this. I'll go ahead and name her too. Erin Fox she's got a horrible reputation here in town. All the lawyers hate her. She exclusively does family court, and she's just got an absolute reputation for dragging these things out and creating more conflict. And that's been my experience for her. Um, I'll say this. So one, we're on our sixth judge in 8 years, which is kind of absurd. And then she's on her third lawyer now, which, is very common for these cluster B types.
Mhm.
And I've been pro se pretty much my whole case. I did have a lawyer um, for about a year and a half, 2 years. But like yourself, I was after spending 20K on him in 18 months. I was like, wow, I can't sustain this.
Mhm.
And then, as I kind of went on, I was learning a lot more along the way, and I had filed my initial paternity suit, and so I was learning a lot about process and the law. So I decided that just cost wise, I had to represent myself.
Mhm. And that's what happens to all of us. And
Yeah.
some parents can do it and some parents can't. You have to be used to getting a lot of verbal abuse, which thankfully I was, as I was married 10 years prior. And so I was used to a lot of that and I could handle the opposing attorney. But some people just aren't built for it.
Yeah, it takes a certain type for sure. Um, I I find it, you know, I don't know. I find it comes kind of naturally to me, strangely. I was one of those kids in high school who did the mock trials and that kind of thing. And I was sort of intrigued by law as a young person. But I didn't go into law, I think, yeah, when I was younger because just all the reading I thought was, felt overwhelming as a young person. But as I've gotten older, I think, Brandon is kind of on this tip too. There is actually immense creativity in the language of law,
Mm.
right? And that's what I love about Brandon is he's breaking down the definitions and the meanings of these words that we use to define law, right? So all meaning is rooted in language, right? Well, the words that we use mean things, right? And so what do they mean? What do these words mean that we're using to adjudicate and to mandate and to regulate, and that's something that I really appreciate about Brandon because he's really parsing out the legalese,
Mhm.
right? And as we know, a lot of these words that are being used mean different things in the courtroom than they do in basic nomenclature, of everyday life, And so we have to kind of really rethink and reset our mind when it comes to the law and how we approach the way that we talk.
Right.
Um,
I mean, I don't think we should be running to a Black's Law dictionary when something's said in court. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah, exactly. Right. We have to agree on the terms, right?
mhm.
It's interesting. I'm going through a thing now. It's sort of inspired by Brandon with the whole car loan thing, and we're talking about the terms, and it's been really fascinating. I don't want to get off subject, but I've really gotten into just the law on a lot of different levels, from family court, constitutional rights, of course, and trust law and common law and natural law. And it's all very intriguing to me. So,
Mhm.
but you do have to know how to write, and you have to know how to structure arguments, and you have to understand logic. A lot of people don't necessarily have, the cojones to get in there and really and fight that fight. It's also incredibly time consuming, as you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And so if you're, trying to work and have a family life, which is already an overtime job, it's hard to, be spending your nights and weekends, researching the law and writing pleadings. It's very time consuming.
Oh, it is. It is. People don't realize that you will be up till 1 AM, 2 AM in the morning trying to get things filed even on time.
Yeah,
It's
that too.
ridiculous. It shouldn't be happening, and, we were talking earlier again, it just should all be in civil court and
Civil
just
due process.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now did you find with that judge that you have, this Danielle, constantly doing horrible things, right? You know,
Yeah.
did she work in the DA's department with the opposing attorney for a period of time? Do you know that? Anything about that?
Wow. That's interesting. I haven't looked into that. But there could be a conflict of interest there.
That was one.
It's all a club, right? So they take care of their own. They
Right.
were all lawyers previous to being judges. And so depending on their relationship with whoever's, in their courtroom, they're going to be biased, I think, fundamentally. I mean, our last judge, this blew me away. We had this previously. We had Judge Wayne Yelling, who was he was an okay judge. He didn't give my ex any mileage. He shut her down pretty much left and right. And we had him on the bench for 2 years. He ended up recusing because his clerk's daughter was literally in the same grade school class as my daughter, which I didn't feel like necessarily was a conflict of interest. It seemed, thrice removed, but he wanted to clean his hands of the case, but he at one point he asked the lawyer, we were scheduling a conference or something like that, and it was like on a Thursday or Friday. He goes, oh, well, that's the day of benches and brews. Are you going to that? Kind of thing. And like they were literally making social plans in court. Like, am I going to see you at this event? And I was like,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
you guys doing here? Like
They're all doing it. Yeah, this isn't the first time I've heard yeah, exactly.
it blew me away. I'm like, are we in a courtroom here, or they're talking about meeting at this social event? It blew my mind, actually.
Oh, I know, and I've heard, and it's happened in my case, that if you want to win your case, find a judge and an attorney that have worked in the DA's department for years.
Hmm.
If you can connect them, and you'll win.
Interesting. That's something to look into for sure, because she was a prosecutor, and so
Mhm.
they might have been sitting across from each other. I know Ron Reynes, who I mentioned before, he actually went to college. He was in law school with our judge, and he was telling me that he's had pretty good luck with her, which is surprising,
Yeah.
but not, right?
Yeah.
And so, I've thought about bringing him on, but he's a really good guy, and I like him a lot. And we kind of sit down every 2 or 3 months, and he sort of gives me advice pro bono on procedure and kind of how to approach things. Um, uh, but he has a very different approach. He wants me to be what do you say, more contrite. He's like, he wants me to go in with contrition, kind of hat in hand, and kind of pretend to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm
Oh,
this awful person. And I'm like, dude, that is not my angle on this.
mm-mm.
And I would caution really anyone from kind of taking that approach. I really have shifted gears here, where I want to hold the court's feet to the fire at every level, and assert my constitutional rights at every level, and really challenge jurisdiction and challenge the authority of the court, because as we mentioned, I think the family court has no jurisdiction fundamentally under the Constitution. And these family courts, like I was saying before, the family court in Arizona was literally created out of thin air in
Yeah.
1984 by Judge Warren, and I didn't even know that until just recently, and that kind of blew my mind,
Oh,
that that we're dealing with an institution, an administrative body that's only been, on paper for 40 years. It's kind of shocking, really.
Very scary that it's just it blows me away when I hear things that, that they start these things just at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, like let's just poof, let's create family court, right? Um, yeah, it really blows my mind. It's going to be interesting to see, when I get back in front of the judge, eventually, how things are going to go. Because previously didn't understand, uh, you know, when they say, "Do you understand?"
Right.
That they're asking you, "Do you stand under my jurisdiction?" Right? And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the sense that I'm going to try not to get, found in contempt.
Well, we were talking earlier as well, which we should have just recorded because that would have been a great podcast too. But
Right on.
I was telling you about Morgan versus Morgan, New York State. It's not federal. And it came out in February 1st, 2023. And like with you, if you're not being able to see your kiddo since July, they should just suspend your child support.
Yeah, fortunately, I don't have child support. I'm waiting for that shoe to drop really any day now. I'm expecting to be sued for child support anytime. In fact, when the judge, even before the judge made the ruling in the last day of the trial, excuse me, she kind of made an allusion to, hey, if you want to file for child support, kind of, I'll grant it. Like she didn't say those words exactly, but I was just flabbergasted that she even brought that up, like, hey, this is not even an issue that's on the table. And now you're throwing it out there like, hey, go ahead and I'll sign, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I was really shocked by that. And I'm actually shocked that my ex hasn't filed for child support yet. I think it's a little complicated now because she's making more money than I am. She's on her third relationship or since our relationship, and they're like she's on the 2-year cycle, right?
Hmm.
And she got her ex fiance to put his house. He took like a HELOC out on his house and for like 30K to pay her legal fees, right? And she made a big hoodoo in the trial that, we took out a loan. And I'm like, you didn't take out a loan. This is your
He's
boyfriend's money.
stupid.
Oh,
He's
he's so stupid
stupid.
because guess what?
Oh
This
my
summer,
God.
after she graduated nursing school, guess what? Their relationship's over now. And so he's on the hook for her legal fees. And I don't know what happened exactly in their relationship, but they're not together anymore.
Well, and this again is something we should warn people about. And in my case as well, my husband, I did not want him involved in anything. Like the child support was my problem, the legal fees are my problem. Everything, every charge card was in my name that I was swiping for these attorneys that torpedoed my case. I didn't want him to be tainted with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's really messed up about the whole child support thing is the arrears. And then I don't know if you're aware of the website. There's a website, national website, where they list all of the parents that are behind that are in arrears.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that. What's that?
I can't remember the name of it. We looked it up one time because we had a client who was what he was incarcerated and he got out and then he was like $30,000 in arrears, right? And some people, I mean, they have 250,000. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's a website and you can look people up and what's really sad is then this causes prejudice for people when for jobs and things
Mhm.
like that. And so people don't get jobs or maybe they don't get an apartment or something like that. It's really sad. Yeah, I don't remember the website here. I don't know if I could pull it up. But they literally list, they list all the people that are behind on their child support. It's really sad.
Oh, I was
It's a nationwide.
I was
Um,
probably on that list at one time.
it's crazy. I've seen some of the people on there, and they're like, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. But anyway, Um, yeah, I can't find it here offhand. I'll try to find it and send you a link.
Yeah, and I can put that in the podcast notes as well. And the parent aid, how did that start?
So it started 30 years ago in 1990, and it was put together, funded by local exchange clubs. And the initial mission was basically preventing child abuse. And so we've actually gone through kind of an identity change here just this year, because our mission statement kind of evolved. And thank you for reading our mission statement, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, our mission statement used to be preventing child abuse through education and support of the community. Well, we sort of did some research, and we realized that, the word child abuse really is daunting for people, right?
Mhm.
So because we want all parents to come to parent aid. We think all parents need a little parent aid, right? As we
Mhm.
know. I mean, the Surgeon General just came out this summer and said that 65% of parents are experiencing overwhelm, in
Mhm.
their lives, balancing work life and raising kids and everything. So we want to help any parents, right? When people see the word child abuse, then of course they think, well, I don't abuse my child, so why do I need this organization? So we've gone through a refit.
Mhm.
Um, so we've been doing parenting education and family support. We have a bunch of different programs. We do the active parenting program. We also do home visitation. So we actually go out like on a weekly basis to homes for parents that sign up for our voluntary program. And we kind of go through several layers of, safety, discipline, and communication, that kind of thing. And that's a very effective program. I was actually involved in that program for a year and a half because, when I got into this and I started realizing, actually, I want to plug this book right here. I think this is one of the best books. I don't know if you've seen it. Um, it's the Bill Eddy book, Splitting. Have you ever seen this book?
Right. Uh, I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
so this book, it's so crazy because I found this book at a free library at a laundromat.
Wow.
And I was like, are you kidding me, man? Like it was like sent from God, you know?
Yeah,
And I
right.
started reading into this, and basically it gives you a play-by-play of like this is what you need to do when you're dealing with a cluster B type in a family court matter, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I started just getting as many eyes on as possible, So that's when I signed up for the home visitation because if she's going to make allegations about me, I want to have someone that can rebut those allegations, right? So I started um, as a client in 2019 with Parent Aid, and I just started taking classes. I took the active parenting classes, which are really fantastic. I would recommend them for any parent. And then after about 2 years, I guess it was like kind of late 21 into 22, they said, hey, we want to start this Love Like a Dad program. It was our executive director, Alan Stockelberg, who's been a real mentor and a dear friend and supporter. Um, and he said, we would like you to run the program. And I was just, overwhelmed with honor. I was like, wow, I don't feel like I'm qualified. And he was like, I think you're
Oh.
overqualified. And so we dove into that in 22, and I came on as a part-time facilitator. I wanted to do the weekly dads group, support group, and then I started doing boot camp for new dads. And then we were running this program that's a curriculum from the National Fatherhood Initiative called the 24/7 Dad, or 24/7 AM PM Dad, I guess. They have two curriculum. And so we ran that for a year, and then basically we decided to kind of cull that down into a 6-week program because they're both two 12-week programs. And we wanted to kind of cull that down into one 6-week program. So we sort of cherry picked all of our favorite parts and put it into the 6-week program that we call Dad Share.
Mhm.
And I really enjoy that program. We run it every 6 weeks, and then I take a week off, and then so we do it 7 times a year. Um, and that's a great program. And then I also do a workshop that I call Dads in Divorce.
Mhm.
And so it's just a 2 or 3 hour workshop. And sometimes I try to get lawyers like Ron to come in that can kind of talk hypothetically about cases, and really just help help parents navigate the legal system. A lot of what we get are parents who are, have just started a divorce or just started a custody matter, or maybe they have a DCS case,
Mhm.
or maybe they have some kind of DV situation, that the judge says, hey, you need to take some parenting classes, kind of thing. But a lot of people we get are, they come in with deer in the headlights, and they're like,
Mhm.
I just got served with divorce, or my partner's leaving me, and took the kids, that kind of thing. And so we do kind of a triage thing where we help them sort of ground and kind of prioritize. All right, you got to take care of your health, you got to take care of your life,
Mhm.
what's next, partialize, prioritize, kind of thing. And that's a big part of what we do.
Mhm.
So we
So,
serve about oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, you go ahead.
We serve about 1,000 families a year,
Mhm.
and we positively impact the lives of over 2,500 kids here in Tucson and Pima County, Southern Arizona.
So in this parent aid, do you also teach personality disorders? Do you go over that with parents?
Not specifically in any course necessarily, but it's certainly something that I bring up in my courses, So I typically wait for people to kind of talk about their situation, and if I see sort of a pattern of behavior that they're describing about their partner, then I will introduce that. I will often recommend the splitting book
Mhm.
to people who are in a high conflict situation, because I think this book is really the gospel when it comes to dealing with cluster B types, because it really gives you a breakdown of cluster B types, but also how to deal with the all of the allegations and the gaslighting and the flying monkeys and all that stuff. So that's a really great resource. Another good book that I like is the co-parenting book by what's his name here? I've got it somewhere. He's got a great Instagram page called Unapologetic Parenting. He's out of Texas. Um, Gosh, I've got so many books here. I don't know where it is offhand. Um, it's the Parallel Parenting Solution. It's by Carl Knickerbocker. He's a really good advocate too. This is his book. Carl Knickerbocker, Parallel Parenting Solution. And he's got a page called Unapologetic Parenting, which I think is great. And
Mhm.
he really talks, he's actually a lawyer, and he talks about, how to manage cluster B types when you're dealing with family court.
What do you think? We were talking about false accusations. It seems like as soon as you walk in there, whoever makes the false accusation, they just run with it. And
Yeah,
this has
especially
got to
if it's a
stop.
DV.
Well, that or, they're calling somebody mentally ill.
That's the other thing too.
I'm like so
I
tired
mean,
of that.
oh yeah, that and well, unfortunately, as we know, the cluster B types are the ones that accuse other people of having mental illness, right? So, for example, my ex is, classic covert malignant narcissistic borderline type. I think she's comorbid, frankly, maybe even sociopathic, honestly, and I don't use that word lightly. Um, and of course, she accused me of being a narcissist, right?
Mm.
And so I've gone through two total psychological evaluations. Of course, the first one I did, well, we don't agree with this one because it doesn't, confirm our narrative, right?
Mhm.
So then it was her boyfriend paid, $5,000
Oh my
for their person to come in, right? And in the report, I've had three therapists over the last 10 years, which of course, people that have NPD don't have therapists.
God.
They all testified, and this forensic psychologist interviewed them, and her entry on the report was a paragraph, like this big. But then she gave the boyfriend 3 pages in her report. I've never even met this guy, you know? And I did all the testing, of course, no personality disorders whatsoever, right? But then at the very end of the report, in the last, she wrote that I have narcissistic traits and OCD traits, right? which I don't have any OCD at all, and I don't think I have any narcissistic traits. But then when I cross-examined her, I said, "Well, what are the traits, right? Because there's 9 traits, right? And you have to have 5 of them to qualify
Mhm.
as a diagnosed NPD, right?" And she said, "Well, you clearly have no empathy for your ex." And I'm like, "Why would I?
I know.
I mean, I've been arrested twice, you know? Everything's been dismissed. You know
Right?
what I mean? Like, why would I have compassion for this person that's trying to destroy my life, you know?
Exactly, exactly, especially when they're calling out false accusations of you're mentally ill and you're alienating the kids from the children.
Yeah,
From the father, I mean.
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I just don't know how anybody can't see through this game, you know? It seems so apparent, you know? Um, I'm trying to really shift my focus. I got found a really great therapist now. Dr. Christie. Gosh, I can't remember her last name right now. We met through the Strong Families Conference here in Phoenix. They have a conference every year, and she was the keynote speaker who gave an amazing talk on cluster B personality types and how it's impacting the family court. And it
Mhm,
was very impressive. Well, we ended up connecting afterwards, and I approached her and I said, "Hey, listen, after the conference, a couple weeks later, I said, would you be available to testify as an expert witness?" And she said, "Well, I've never done it before, but I'm totally open to that." Right. So we kind of started a conversation going. And then I said, "Hey, would you be interested in, doing some counseling, and reviewing my case, kind of, and so I'm basically sending her information now, and then we're meeting on a weekly basis. And she's really encouraged me, which I think is great advice, to just really focus, on my daughter exclusively, obviously, and really just ignore the stuff with mom,
mhm, mhm.
with the co-parent. And I think that really is good advice. And she's been through it herself, and then her current partner has been through it with his ex, right?
Mhm.
And so she's really well informed about all this stuff.
It seems though when they keep the child away from you for some period of time, the child starts splitting. And when you get them
Absolutely.
back, and splitting, you can't reverse that. Once that happens, then that creates another personality disorder in your child.
Yes, and that's terrifying, honestly, and that's my greatest fear, of course. Um, what children need is stability. They need
Mhm,
consistency, and to remove a parent from their life
mhm,
is devastating to a child, um, because it destroys their worldview. And like you said, it creates this splitting phenomenon because it puts them into a fight or flight state where they cannot depend on their reality, right? This person that's been in their life, that's been a stable person in their life, is gone, all of a sudden, and they don't understand why. And then, when the other co-parent is saying who knows what about the other parent,
mhm.
it creates that phenomenon, because they have to compartmentalize their life, right? And then if you have a parent who is alienating another parent and they are talking badly about that parent, there's probably a lot of other stuff going on there, manipulation, other lies, neglect, that kind of thing. So, as you know, children have to put up a false persona to just survive in that environment, right? And that's really what causes that phenomenon is they can't relax and be themselves.
No, it's sad, and it's also sad that these attorneys who are also, um, aiding and abetting this child psychological abuse along with the judiciary, this has got to stop.
Yeah, in fact, there was a couple of things I wanted to reference. One is the conspiracy against rights,
Mhm,
in my research, I've really been trying to figure out how do I go after the establishment, right?
mhm.
Um, I mean, honestly, I want to sue everybody. Um, but there's this conspiracy against rights, and I forget which code it is here. Section 241. What is it here? Yeah, 18 U.S. Code 241, conspiracy against rights. So, if two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the state, territory, commonwealth, possession, district, blah, blah, blah. That's one that I would recommend. And then there's the other one, I think was it 18 CFR 1983. Have you heard of that one? That's an intriguing one.
Mm.
But unfortunately, let's see here. What is it? It's where you can sue a party basically for violation of rights. Oh, civil action for deprivation of rights. 42 U.S. Code 1983.
Mhm.
Civil action for deprivation of rights. But it does, unfortunately, it states specifically that, in an action brought against a judicial officer for an act of omission taken in such officer's judicial capacity, right? So basically, it's saying you can't sue a judge. But then, as we were talking about before, well, can you sue the person, right?
Mhm.
Because they're acting in a judicial capacity and an administrative capacity, but they're still a person sitting on the bench, right?
Mhm.
So can you sue them, for deprivation of rights?
I mean, they carry malpractice insurance, at least they're supposed to.
Right. So if it's a civil matter, then technically you should be able to sue them for money, right?
Hmm.
So it's not a criminal proceeding, it's a civil proceeding, right?
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I've even thought about just filing the civil complaint against the judge just to get her off my case because then, well, you can't adjudicate this because you have a conflict of interest, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Even though it will probably get dismissed or thrown out based on this code specifically. Um, I don't know. And this is where I kind of am. And this is one of the reasons why I love your show is because, it's like, thinking creatively about the law,
Hmm.
right? We're confined in this system on some level. And so how do we work within the system and the way it's established to tear it down effectively?
Yeah. Yeah. Please God. Yeah. The sooner the better.
Yeah.
Because
Um,
these judges, they don't like your kids. They love their kids, but they get to go home to their kids. We don't, but they do.
Yeah, the strange thing is the last two judges, including the judge we have right now, the previous one admitted that they don't even have children,
Uh,
right? And then I don't even think this woman has children either. And I'm like, how are you possibly on the family court bench and you don't even know what it's like to be a parent, you know?
right,
Because unless you're a parent, you don't know. You
right,
know, there's two kinds of people, people with kids and people without kids, And as we know, it's a very different
right.
living situation.
And or judges that are bought off, or they all know each other.
Yeah, that's the part that's really
Hmm.
frustrating is that they do all know each other on some level.
Hmm.
And they all go out drinking together, they run into each other and they're not supposed to talk about these cases, but we all know that they are.
Hmm.
We know that deals get done in the elevator on the way up to their office and
Hmm.
it's just the way it works. And there's a certain humanity there, but there's obviously conflict of interest and it's really sad because even though these judges are supposed to act in the best interest of the children, I just don't think they are. I really don't.
No, they're acting in the best interest of the pocketbook. And, which parent has more money?
Yeah,
Who can they go after with the more money? It's not like a gender war. It's who's got the most money.
absolutely. I agree 100%. And if you can stack some heavy hitting lawyers behind you, you're typically going to crush a pro se litigant, for the most part, unless they're very adept and they have a very strong case. Which is sad because my understanding is that judges are supposed to defer to pro se litigants, and there's
Hmm.
there's some case law on that. I'm not sure. I think it's Han. I can't remember what case it is. But they're supposed to defer, give some deference, to the pro se litigants.
Right,
Um,
because they didn't go to law school.
right.
We're,
I
we're
mean,
just learning as we go.
Right. And they say, well, that's no excuse. You're supposed to understand the law, but it's like,
Uh, uh-uh.
yeah.
Well, they created this monster. They
Oh, absolutely.
created the parent going pro se by milking them of all their resources and everything they have on top of taking their kids away. Now you've got a pro se that's, going to get in there and fight.
Yeah. And my biggest recommendation for anyone is if they are going to go pro se, if they are in a custody or divorce process, is do your own research, dive in deep, and really understand what's going on here, um, because we're governed by consent, right? So we have to stand up for our rights. We have to understand the law on some level to be able to advocate for ourselves. And I think this is where the revolution comes is through the law, in a sense, and through asserting our rights, um, and I think we've lost that in this country, in a sense. We've become complacent, and this is again where I think Brandon is just a real genius. Is that we have to stand up for ourselves, and litigation is really how things get done in this country, unfortunately.
I agree. I agree. Then the parent can be put in a position where they're being chided to not litigate. They'll tell the other parent who has custody will tell that child, "Oh, if mom or dad will stop litigating, it would just all go away. They're not acting normal." These are the things I would hear. It's like, wow, man, I had to litigate the child support or I would be in jail every 3 months. And thank God I won in superior court because that just put a halt to everything.
Yeah, I think the flip side of that coin too is this idea that, well, if you really wanted your kids, you'd try harder,
Mm.
when you have all these barriers, and as you know, the court system moves glacially, I mean, it's horribly, horribly slow. I mean, I'm waiting on a ruling now from October 10th, they set a deadline to file a response to a memo that was filed by the visitation
Mhm.
agency. And you know, I'm still waiting on
Oh,
something from the court. So, I mean, I'll be candid. My weekend is going to be spent writing and researching, the next couple days, because
mm,
I'm ready to hit the ground running again this week. Um, I'll say real quick. So, in Arizona, I don't know what it's like uh, in Pennsylvania where you are, but you have to wait a year after a ruling, after a final ruling,
mm.
unless, of course, you appeal, or you can motion to reconsider, that kind of thing. But again, all those take time. So my appeal effectively took a whole year, right? And I lost my appeal based on not having access to the evidence and testimony. And then, I mean, I literally had to walk the mandate. I went down to the appeals court and got the printed copy and walked it over to Superior Court to return, because I was on the phone like, hey, where's the ruling to send it back to Superior Court, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, well, it's going to be another 30 days. I'm like, what are you talking about? The case has been over for months now. And so I had to send it back to the Superior Court, and then I immediately filed a new petition, right, to modify parenting time and legal decision making. And of course, her lawyer motioned to dismiss, right? And I objected, and then the judge granted the motion to dismiss, basically saying that there was no cause for which relief could be granted. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I haven't seen my daughter in a year. I'm doing supervised visitation. That's cause right there. The law is very clear. 50-50 is in the best interest of the child,
Mhm.
So, this judge threw some ridiculous allegations again at me, and it's all just based on false narrative,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
it's a total lack of information. So I met with my guy, Mr. Reynes, and he said, look, notify the court of the material changes, right? So I sent in the progress notes. Um, I uh, I sent in some other information, and basically to kind of set up my case that there has been material change in my daughter's life. Oh, one, my ex broke up with her fiance, right? So they had to move. This was the second time they've been kicked out of his place,
Mm.
and this is what's so creepy is that she's leaving my daughter with her ex, this guy that she's known for 2 years. And as I know, it's just she's just needs a babysitter,
Yeah,
These
right.
cluster B types, they don't actually want to raise their children. They want other people to do it for them. And yet they
Hmm.
want all the power and control, over the child. Um, so I've established my sort of material change, my case in a sense, and now I'm going to refile my petition. And I think I'm probably going. My therapist has advised me to file for emergency temporary orders based on the progress notes.
Hmm.
The last few progress notes from October that I got, my daughter was reported, and I apologize, I might get emotional here, but that she was wrapping herself in a blanket and laying on the floor at the therapist office. And and that is just horrifying to me, frankly,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I don't know what's going on.
Right. And you've got a parent here that wants to help and, you know, see the child and spend time. Instead of a babysitter, why not have just call you up and say, "Hey, I've got to do extra work. Can you babysit?" Or why
That's what
not?
a normal person does, right?
Right. But there, when you're working with these personality disorders, it's impossible.
Yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. I had a thought. I'm sorry I lost it, but
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. No, I'm loving the conversation. Yeah, I mean that's what normal parents do is they work it out. I mean, I know loads of people who are divorced and they share holidays, they go on vacations together,
Right.
and I'm like, man, that's amazing. I would love to be able to do that.
Right.
I mean, not necessarily with my ex, but with an ex.
Right.
Um, and I mean, I literally facilitate co-parenting workshops. We have a couple different programs where we deal with high conflict situations, and there are workshops that we do that directly address how to have effective communication, how to set boundaries, how to gray rock, how to deal with people who just want to create chaos.
Hmm.
Which is really the heart of these personality types, is creating chaos, creating confusion, creating subterfuge, creating that sort of mind mess. I don't want to cuss on here, but
Well, you're allowed. Yeah. I
mind
encourage
fuck.
swearing. Yeah. Right. I encourage swearing because if you don't, you could end up with cancer. So let it out.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. Swearing is good for your health. I forgot.
Right. It is. It totally is. And it's also that way with the child too.
Mm.
What are they going to think? And they're hearing a one-sided story, and now you're the bad guy. I'm
Yeah,
just,
so the way it broke down this summer is, you know, all of a sudden my daughter doesn't want to come see me,
mm-hmm.
right? Like out of the blue, and I'm begging this agency like, "Hey, this is a major red flag." And so then what did they do? The agency started calling my ex and asking her, does does his daughter, I don't want to say her name, does her daughter want to come, to see her dad? Oh, no, no. So then she just stopped coming to visitation. And then, supposedly they suspended visitation without telling anyone, right? And so then I filed a notice to the court, saying, look, this is parenting alienation, basically, parent
Mm-hmm.
alienation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the agency responded and said, "Oh, well, we suspended the services." And I'm like, you have a court order. Like,
Right.
you,
Hello.
you can't just make unilateral decisions like this.
Ah.
So that's kind of what I'm waiting for right now from the judge. And unfortunately, there's only a few agencies in town, and of course, they're all very expensive. I've spent over $7,000 in the last year just to visit with my child for 2 hours a week. Um, but they're all shutting down really, because one, it's not cost effective, and I think the liability and staffing and
Mm-hmm.
it is tough work. you know?
Right. I think parents are also not participating in this as well, because if you have to pay $1,000 for 2 hours to see your child, and then there's certain things you're not allowed to say, and
Oh
and
yeah.
they give you the rundown of what you can and cannot say.
Oh yeah. So you can't discuss anything with your child, right?
No,
You can't ask them any
you
questions
can't be
about anything.
yourself. You can't
No,
even
you
be yourself.
can't.
No.
It's horrible. It's just the most demeaning, demoralizing situation with your child. And then you have to pretend like everything's super great, right? You
Hmm.
know, and so you're being artificial, you know, around your own child. You can't relax and be yourself, you know.
Hmm.
It is just so heartbreaking. You know, and I feel lucky in a sense that I feel like I'm pretty good at dealing with these kinds of things, you know, and I really feel for parents that you know, are just caught up in this mess and they, you know, they don't know how to respond to it, you know. And unfortunately, people overreact a lot. You know, it's a very emotional
Hmm.
situation. We had this other agency in town, and I'll just call them out, 5H's. It's run by this woman. It's a sole proprietorship, and she is just an absolute nutter. And they make you sign this contract, you know, and it's like I mean, it's like 80 pages. It is, I'm not even exaggerating. It's
It's
absurd.
it's called 5 H's.
5H's, yeah. They're a
It's like
local
is
agency.
that like the levels of hell?
Oh my God, I've never even thought of that, but that's so true. Um, yeah, this woman Courtney runs this agency, and I mean, she canceled the visitation, the last one that I had with her. This is over a year ago, because I'd emailed her several times and asked for her business address because I wanted to file subpoena for the visitation notes because she was refusing to give me the visitation notes, which she was supposed to provide, you know. So I said, look, you know, give me your address so I can file a subpoena and have you served, right? Well, she kept refusing, right? So at the visitation, I just handed her an index card and I said, hey, would you mind writing down your address, you know, your business address,
Mhm.
right? She canceled the visitation immediately.
Oh,
And then she wrote this letter to my ex saying, oh, he was acting erratically and inappropriate, and I was concerned for your daughter's mental health. And
ah,
I was like, wow, wow. So
that's
that's the
sad.
kind of games that, you know, some of these people play too.
Hmm.
Um, and then I ended up finding her address and I did serve the subpoena. And then she flooded me with these bills, basically saying that I had violated the contract and all these rules, you know. So she literally sent me like $1,500 in bills, like that the same week that I subpoenaed her, wanting to charge me for appearance, you know, and all this stuff. And I just ignored her, you know, and I notified the court and requested for a new agency to be assigned.
They're horrible. I know a mom in Virginia that went to some supervising agency, and she allowed her and her son to walk around the block. And so when the mother was talking to the son, the supervisor would chime in and say, well, I wouldn't say that. I'd say this. I mean, it was just like throwing in their own conversation. It's like, no, this is their time to talk.
Yeah,
Again, more untrained people to muddy the water.
yeah, and I mean, I even had a situation too where a supervisor, you know, was like confiding in me and saying, "Well, you know, you can talk to me, and I won't leave put it in the report," kind of thing, you know, and I feel like that's very suspect, you know, that kind
Hmm.
of behavior. It's very duplicitous. It's really, really, really sad,
Right.
unfortunately. And you know, this judge, what's super messed up is that the previous judge yelling, because you know, my ex has been trying to get supervised visitation for 5 years. And I mean, I literally have police reports where she's quoted as saying, he's a great dad, but I'm going to ask for supervised visitation. I'm just like, are you kidding me? I mean, verbatim. And so the previous judge, he said, look, if I order supervised visitation, it's going to be for like 6 or 8 weeks until we figure out what's going on, right? That's it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he kind of signaled to her that this is not going to be forever. But then this new judge came in and did the final ruling and ordered supervised visitation. So I've had to do that for the last year, basically. Um, and now I'm not even getting to see my daughter. So,
Well, then
um,
I think you should talk to this Ron Reynos about Morgan versus Morgan.
I will for sure. And so part of what I'm considering doing is one, suing my ex for parental alienation. Again, really more so to compel her to come back to the table, you know.
Hmm.
Um, because I just found this out last week. Parental alienation is in the DSM-5, the new edition. It's considered a pathological disorder, which I did not know. So they have qualified it as a neurological disorder, which is intriguing.
Are they
The,
calling?
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, are they calling it child psychological abuse? Is that what they're going taking it under?
Basically, yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
that it's a child emotional and psychological abuse. And it's a pathological condition, kind of akin to the pathology of cluster B types.
Mhm.
Someone had referenced it, I can't remember who it was. Somebody on LinkedIn had referenced it, that it was in the new DSM, and
That
so
was
I looked it
me.
up.
I think it was me.
It probably was you,
Ah!
yeah, actually. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I think what I love about your program and other people in the space, is just the sharing of information, right? It's like we all have to be well informed, right? Citizens,
Mhm.
or nationals, sovereigns, if you will. And so I just love what you do, and I love sharing,
Thank you.
info because we need to have these conversations, and we need to, coalesce and organize so that we can help each other navigate this just horrific situation. Um, I mean, just to really go out there, I think it is planned in a sense, I think this goes back just to, the industrial age in a sense of, separating father as to work and, and the mom and all this stuff and this whole atomic family kind of
Mhm.
ideology that's really being put back on display lately, with these kind of trad wife situations and it's just it's really sad,
Mhm.
I think we really need to rethink our idea of what family is and how we're
Mhm.
going to protect these younger generations, especially with this, the advent of social media and the internet in general. Kids are horribly suffering right
Mhm.
now, and I think there's just a huge identity crisis going on right now with children. And we've got distracted parents, we've got kids who are growing up on devices, and I think I think we're going to see a lot of negative impact for some time.
Well, I try to put my 2 cents in when I can, even if it's at Sam's Club when you're waiting for them to open the doors, right?
Yeah,
And there was an older fellow there, not too much older, but and then there was a younger fellow, probably 25, standing next to him. And I just struck up conversation. I said, "Hey, have either of you been through family court?" And the
nice.
older fellow said, "Yeah, I just blew through $58,000 and then she remarried. Now everything's fine." And I said, "Oh, that's fine." And his kids were also closer to aging out, right? Then the younger one says, "Well, I'm engaged." I said, "Well, did you do background checks?"
Mhm.
And he says, "Oh, no, I'm gonna just trust the process." I said, "Well, what if" I'm just putting it out there, what if you're having a happy marriage, and what if, God forbid, you should be in a car accident and you or her becomes a head injury? And then what if their personality changes where they decide they don't want you to see the children? Should that be put in a prenup that in case something happens, you get to see the children? And then he started thinking, and I said, you've got to do background checks on your in-laws, see who they're connected to, because I'm telling you what, if they're connected to any judges, run. Okay, just
Yeah,
run." And so, he looked at me, he said, "I'm gonna go talk to a lawyer." He left. He didn't even go into Sam's Club.
nice. That's
So
wild.
I try to warn people about these personality disorders. I it's too bad because you could have a nice kid, nice person, just run into one of these that doesn't evolve yet until you have children.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like the numbers are going up. I think it used to be 1 in 25, and now I think it's 1 in 10. Especially in the United States, I think the incidence is just really high. And it's such an amalgam,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I think the comorbidity is more of an issue, right? It's like they're not just narcissistic, they're not just borderline, they're not just sociopathic. It's kind of an amalgam there. And I think, our language is too deficit, to really explain and understand what's really going on there. Um, but I always tell people, especially, young dads or people that are dating and thinking about getting married, whatever, is, give it that 2 years, do a 2 year engagement, right? If you're going to get engaged, whatever,
Hmm.
do 2 years before you have kids and that kind of thing, because usually that's kind of the window where people really start to flesh out, who is this
Hmm.
person, because the cluster bees can last about 18 months to 2 years. And then somehow the mask starts to come off,
Right,
whether
right.
it's, excessive drinking or pathological lying or cheating or just duplicitous type behavior,
Hmm.
or just weird erratic behavior, like, my ex was like a blackout drunk, and she would get violent when she would drink, and so we had to have a rule like, no spirits, and like, I'm personally not much of a drinker at all. But we kind of had to, like, no spirits in the house, like
Hmm.
2 drink maximum kind of thing, because it was dangerous,
Hmm. Hmm. That's too
um
bad.
yeah. But unfortunately, we had already had a child at that point. So,
Hmm.
um, I was in a situation where, I was 45 and I was in a relationship, that, we were planning on having a child and we ended up not. And then when I got into this relationship with my ex, she was like, let's start a family kind of thing, rushing right in and all that
Oh,
stuff, which,
yeah.
in retrospect, were serious red flags, right?
Right.
Um, but I didn't know what I know now, kind of thing. And so she said all the right things, and was, I want to spend the rest of my life with you and all those things, and so that was, it was kind of what I needed and wanted to hear at the time, right? So I bought the
Hmm.
story, but it really didn't take long, for all this sort of truth to come out.
And I
And
think another red flag, I also warned, I used to train nurses because I was a nurse for 23 years. So I'd have some little nurse following me around. I said, look, if the mother-in-law hates you, give them the ring back and run
yeah.
because you are, in fact, marrying the whole family. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, that's true. And her mom was actually diagnosed borderline. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's another red flag there. I'll share it real quickly. So, my ex is so adept at manipulation. She actually got my family to pay her legal fees for a number of years, to the tune of like 50K plus. And basically, what she did was, she triangulated and isolated me from my family. She created, havoc in my family, and then basically had control of my daughter, right? So, oh, if you want to see your daughter, well, then you have to pay my legal fees, right? And
Oh
she
my
played that,
God.
yeah, she played that game for years until she bled them out, and they basically had to cut her off, and that's, when her boyfriend took over. So she's somehow grifted about 80K, in legal fees out of this over the last, 8 years. And
Oh my God.
far as I know, she hasn't paid a dime.
Oh, geez. This is terrible.
It's amazing, right? It's just
Right. Oh,
it's sad, unfortunately.
yeah.
I think what's really sad, is just that people who want to be in their children's lives, they're present,
Mhm,
they're
mhm,
healthy, they have stable lives, and they just want to be in their children's lives, and they
mhm.
have co-parents that want to do everything possible to prevent that from happening. And it's not about the kids, it's about hurting the other parent.
Right, right.
And that to me is mental illness
Oh,
fundamentally.
completely. And especially when their spouses participate and their parents and everybody participates, In fact, my youngest was attending I won't keep you all afternoon, but he was attending basketball practice during the summer, where he would ride his bike down a very dangerous road where there had occurred several deaths. Okay. And so what I would do is I would meet him at that area of the school, and I'd give him water, I'd give him lunch, because I know he wasn't given that. How do you run across a basketball, you know, without any energy? It's mind boggling. And then he would have to ride his bike all the way back home. So I emailed the ex and I said, look, I'm obviously not able to work because you caused my job loss. But anyway, I could drive him to there and back and know he'd be there safely. He just said, we're going to adhere to the court order
Yeah.
at the expense of a person's life.
Yeah.
Done with this.
Yeah. And a normal, healthy co-parent would say, hey, sure, that's a great idea. Thank you so much. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's called cooperation.
Hmm.
It's called co-parenting instead of counter-parenting.
Exactly. Uh,
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
could talk about this stuff all day, honestly, and I love the conversation, and I really love what you're doing, and
Thank you.
I really appreciate you having me on the program, and if anyone wants to contact me directly
Hmm.
with questions or anything, I'm totally open to whoever out there wants to talk about this issue, and if anybody has any ideas, about
Hmm.
how to proceed, I really think we all just need to collectively, help each other navigate this and just create a support network because, as you know, it's very isolating and it's very demeaning and demoralizing the whole process and it eats away at your soul,
Right.
um, and the
It's
healing.
evil.
Yeah, it's evil, and then like you were saying, the enablers, it becomes this kind of like, gang warfare
Shocking. Right.
almost, and all these enablers who don't understand what's really going on. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
my family included, and it's just really devastating.
Well, how can people reach you?
So you can email me at Sean@parentaid.org. SEAN is how I spell my first name. Parent Aid is parentaid.org. So you can email me directly. Any questions about anything, really. I'm always open to whatever. And especially if you have creative thinking about family law and
Mhm.
or even case law, I'm really open to that. I think we just fundamentally have to stick together.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. I'm so glad you came on. And like to have you back again. And we can,
Yeah, I would love to have some good news for you at some point,
oh,
and we can kind
yes.
of celebrate the process and getting reunified with my daughter. The
Mhm.
one thing that I would share with any parents out there that are listening is that this too shall pass,
Mhm.
and you will get your children back eventually, and you really have to take care of yourself in the process, as you know, Marianne. You have
Mhm.
to focus on your health and really taking care of yourself. So, get into therapy. Get into, regular exercise routine, get into meditation, get into really healthy lifestyles, eating well, sleeping well, because as you know, this phenomenon can cause post-traumatic stress disorder, which I've certainly had over the years, and
Mhm.
then what's called CPTSD, which isn't
Mhm.
necessarily recognized by the DSM, but
Yeah.
that can really have a compounding effect on your life, and it will cause you to break down.
Mhm.
So take care of yourselves out there and reach out, have community, and get the support that you need. I have a weekly dads group every Monday at 5:30. It's on Zoom. So anybody around the world can jump in, and
Mhm.
we've got a nice group of guys. And men have a very difficult time with this. I'll just share briefly. Men are 8 times more likely to die by suicide post-divorce. So I think that speaks to the resiliency of women for sure, but it also, I think, speaks to the fact that, our culture, unfortunately, is really experiencing an endemic of suicides in men. And
Mhm.
And it's just a tragedy. It's a travesty.
Right, right. It's just bad all the way around. I mean, I know of women that have two committed suicide, and it's it's the family court. They have got to go. They
No, I agree
because
100%. It's
oh,
abusive.
right, right. And I'd like to give a shout out to Carl Roberts of Colorado Resilience. He's been on LinkedIn, and he's all for very short court is times. Like it can be resolved in a month. What you know what I mean? We don't have to drag things out. But I just wanted to give him a shout out.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think it's about compromise, and it's about figuring out what it is that you need and want in your relationship with your ex and your child. And unfortunately, both people have to compromise on some level and figure out, what's going to work for them. And if, any parents out there that are going through a divorce or a custody matter, you know, think about the children and what's
Mhm.
best for the children, and put your ego aside and put your desire and need to get revenge or whatever it is that you think you need to get out of the other parent, and do what's right for the children. Because, and this is the thing that a lot of people say that people don't talk about, is that these children are going to grow up and be adults, and they're going to figure out, which parent was really trying and which parent wasn't. And unfortunately, the damage is already done. But your relationship with your child is a very small period of their life.
Mhm.
They're going to be adults for a long time, And if you want a healthy relationship with your kids, do what's right for them, and
Right.
work with the other parents. I mean, obviously, if there is real domestic violence and abuse, you have to protect the kids, first and foremost. But, making stuff up and making innuendos and the
Mhm.
smear campaigns, this stuff has got to stop.
I agree entirely. It's just getting old. It is.
Yeah. And it's insidious, and unfortunately, with these cluster B types, there's just no self-reflection, there's no like, what's my part in this equation,
No, and it's always your fault. The problem
Uh,
is in your house. It's you.
Yeah, all the time, and the nitpicking, and the like, the finding everything,
Mhm.
um, it's a form of coercive control, because it puts people in that fight or flight state, and where you're stuck in hypervigilant mode, where then you don't even get to enjoy your time with your child, because you're trying to just, oh, is this right? Is that right? And oh, we
It's
can't
like
do
you're
that
walking
because
on eggshells the whole time.
exactly, and that's their point. That's the agenda, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
terrifying. It really is terrifying. And unfortunately, people that haven't experienced this, God bless you all. But unless you have, or unless you know somebody that has,
mhm.
it's really challenging to kind of understand, I still run into friends, and I kind of share what's going on. They're like, what, you guys haven't worked that out yet?
It's not that easy.
It's
No, not
not
when you're
that.
dealing with this. Oh, yeah.
They just have no understanding, like,
Mhm.
even if they're divorced, even if they've gone through it, they're like, yeah, we hang out, it's all good,
Well, lucky them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh
We
my,
need more of that. We need
right, we
more
do.
cooperative parents, and we need more people in therapy, and really self-reflecting and
Mhm.
understanding, um, how they contribute to the breakdown in relationships.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
hey, I'm glad you came on and don't jump off, okay?
Okay. Thank you so much, Marianne. I really appreciate it. It's been
Well, I
great to chat with
appreciate
you.
you. Thank you. Hang on.
Sounds
Slam
good.
the Gavels, the podcast, help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I thank you, Sean McClintock, for all this information. I totally appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne.